Okay, so this video is going to be a little bit more about why I left my job as a salesman, what got me to that position, in case anyone wants to get into that space, and then why I decided to leave and go chase my own, venture. So reason why I mainly left, we'll start from like now and work our way back and then go, a little bit more forward. Reason why I left the dealership I was at, I just didn't feel like my moral path kind of aligned with that company itself. Ultimately, they were doing things with clients that I didn't like. They were playing with money. They were doing this. They were doing that. Pretty much everything illegal you could do, this company was doing. And once I found that out, I had a very sour taste in my mouth about pretty much everyone in that building. I come from a very morally aligned family. I was raised Catholic. I was, raised by a very strict father to do what's right, tell the truth, don't fucking lie, stuff like that, and this company did everything the total opposite way, and I hated it. Every day I was there, I was miserable. I hated my life. I wasn't doing my job to the best of my ability because ultimately I really just didn't want to give these guys more cars. I didn't want the opportunity for someone to get fucked over. I didn't want the opportunity for, someone to get screwed out of their dream car or go to sell their dream car. Then, now they're in a position where money's a little tight and they're like, hey, you know what? I should probably move this car, give myself a little bit more funds. I didn't like that. It felt gross to me. It felt like there was a weight on my shoulders constantly of what's the next issue? What's the next problem? Where is this going? How is this going to work? I didn't like that. It felt like almost I was running every day from something, if that makes sense. I felt like constantly I was trying to put out fires that I didn't want to try to put out. I'm a very big person on if you do something wrong, there's repercussions for it and you're going to pay those repercussions. And, I was trying to, how do I say this? I was trying to stay on that line of myself, but also make sure I get a paycheck, right? So the owner of the store would tell me to say something to a client and I wouldn't, I'd snake around it and, put it in a different way where, it didn't feel so disgusting and gross to me. I was pretty honest with the clients. And that's something I pride myself on, is being very, very, very transparent with my clients. At the dealership I worked for before this last dealership, I was straight up and honest about fucking everything. If the car was priced too high, I would call up my client and I'd go, hey, look, we're priced too high. I can keep it at this price, right? But here's what's going to happen. I'm going to bump it down on marketing, so I'm not paying, fees and marketing on this car that's not going to sell because it's 40 grand above market. Or hey, I have an offer here. Is it worth it to even bring it to you? Not really. I was very transparent with my clients, when I was, Jesus Christ, when I was talking with my clients to get them to sign up with me. What the fuck is this retard doing? I was very strict. I was very honest. I would say, hey, I'm not gonna, take your money or I'm not gonna take your car until you're paid in full. The other dealership was a totally different story. It was, send us your car, blah, 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 and we're going to fuck you over, and we're not going to tell you, but we're going to screw you, and we're going to screw you again after the sale, and then we're going to make up some bullshit-ass story about why we deserve more money, and it was just a complete shit show. You know, it was, I don't know how that company's still in business. You know, they would always, oh, there's a little wiener dog. They would always tell me, you know, oh, tell clients that, you know, we've been in business for 25 years. We've, you know, been in Arizona for 10 or 15 years, you know. And once I realized, I had always heard kind of snaky remarks about this dealership, which I probably should have fucking listened to, given the circumstances that they put me in. You know, I definitely should have listened to those people and said, you know, hey, these people are saying shit. Maybe they're saying it for a real reason. But the owner of the store, when I first got there, would always say like, oh, you know, like, they act like I owe them everything. You know, they think they can just come in here, collect cars, and take them to a different dealership and steal my business. You know, he was a very good manipulator, to say the least. He was incredible at it. You know, because I'd sit there and I'd go, well, shit, you know, I kind of feel bad for this individual. You know, because I've tried to start companies of my own. You know, I know what it takes to run a company. I know what it takes to stay in business. I'd seen my father, you know, also try to take that venture route of going and buying it. Oh, fuck. I just got hit by a golf ball. God damn it. I totally forgot what I was talking. Back to companies. Okay, I'd seen my dad try to, you know, buy an AC company and see the struggle of that. You know, that company ended up giving my mom a heart attack. Thankfully, she's still alive today. You know, but I'd seen the stress. I'd seen the want to win, but the difficulty behind it of a smaller business, I guess you could say. So I understood where this guy was coming from. You know, I understood, hey, you know, it's not always perfect. It's not always, you know, not everything in business goes the way you think it is. You know, with business, I always like to say it's going to take twice as long, it's going to cost twice as much, and you're going to get screwed over twice the amount of times you think you would. That's business. You know, everyone's trying to screw over everyone, you know, as far as I've seen. You know, granted, there's a lot of great fucking people out there. And, you know, it's not to say that everyone is like that way in a business. But I think a lot more people are that way than a lot of people aren't. Especially when you get to the higher fields of business. When you get to owners, CEOs, you know, the guys in suits. You know, I saw my dad get screwed over countless amounts of times in corporate positions, and, you know, I learned at a very young age to have a very strong dislike for the corporate world. That's why I went into sales. But let's jump another time back to the first dealership I was at. I was kind of in between positions. You know, I had left doing detailing. I was trying to study again for my real estate exam and get my license. I'm horrible with tests, right? I will openly admit that. I can remember something from 6 years ago or a podcast that I watched once, and I will remember it like it's nothing. But if you put me in front of a test and ask me these questions, I'm not gonna know it. I'm horrible with tests. I was horrible with school. You know, but back to the dealership. First dealership I was at, I reached out to a guy I had followed on Instagram for a while. He seemed like he was, you know, young, successful, you know, doing the right things to make the right moves, and I wanted to be around him. You know, so I DM'd him in the hopes that he would respond. Didn't think he was gonna respond, but reached out to him and just, you know, said, hey, you know, here's my background. You know, I've been in pest control, I've been in real estate, I'm looking for a new position. I see that you're, a pretty successful young guy. What is it that you do? And two, are you looking to hire anyone? And I reached out to him and I sent it. And, I was very direct with, hey, I'm looking for a job. Tell me what it is that you do. If it's something I'm interested in, I'd love to sit down or, hop on a phone call and talk. And that message then led to him responding saying, hey, I'm in the luxury car world. I've done luxury car sales for 5 years now. Everything from Porsche, Lamborghini, Ferrari, stuff like that, all the fun stuff. And me being a big car guy, especially, JDM, Euro, hypercars, I was very, very interested in that. As soon as he kind of responded with that, I was like, oh shit, this is something I'd love to do. I love cars. I love talking to people about cars. I love going to Cars and Coffees. I love everything that is surrounded by cars. I like the people that are in the car industry for the most part. There are some douchebags. But I grew up in the car world. I grew up playing Forza. I grew up having, buying a little sim racing thing and, telling my mom, hey, it's so I can get better at driving. So that way when I start driving, I'm not, completely lost on the road. And, I'd always loved that world. That was a very big part of me growing up, was the car world and Fast and Furious and, what's it called? Need for Speed and, everything that had a car in it I liked. When I was very, very young, I didn't really understand cars. And then once I probably hit 13, 14, I really started to get into the car world. I started to watch Top Gear. I started to, fall in love with the car world. And I did. I fell into an addiction with cars. I know everything about cars. You could ask me, oh, how much horsepower does this car have? I could tell you right off the top of my head. I don't need to, pull out a sheet and look it up. I know it. And that's why I thought I was going to be a really good fit in the car world. I was able to give that advice to buyers. I was able to give that advice to sellers. I knew the market. I knew what was hot. I knew what wasn't. I knew what I call the 25-year rule where, hey, if I buy a car that's, close to getting to 25 years old, and I'm talking about poster cars, Murcielagos, Gallardos, Huracans, shit like that, old rally cars, the cool, rare things is what I'm talking about here, with the 25-year rule. The 25-year rule to me is, hey, if the kids that grew up watching these cars, loving them, had them as a poster car in their room, they loved it, they wanted it, those kids were, 10 years old, let's say. 25 years goes past, they're now 35, they're in a good spot where they have money, they have extra funds, they want these fucking cars. And that was something I pushed heavily on a lot of my clientele, was, hey, stay away from the new shit, let's go find some old things, and let's put money into an investment car. 3 to 5 years, this car is gonna fucking double in value, you're gonna be happy, you're not gonna lose a bunch of money, and we'll move forward. Call me when you want to sell it, we'll sell it, we'll make you extra money, let's go buy something new. I was very big and heavy on investment cars, and I think a lot of my clientele really liked that about me, because I wasn't bullshitting them. I wasn't, oh, let's go fucking buy a Revuelto that's gonna lose $200,000, a couple weeks after you buy it and you put 10 miles on it. That's not how I am. I was like, hey, yo, let's go get an SLS. It's a front engine V8. It's the last of the Mercedes that's probably ever gonna have a gull wing door. I talked to my clients like they were a friend. And at the first dealership, I grew a team of guys under me to also do the same thing as me, which was vehicle consignment. Calling up owners that have their car on Facebook Marketplace or Auto Trader, Cars.com, whatever, saying, hey, I see you have your car listed. I'd love to help you out. I spend, $10,000 a month in marketing. I'm going to take a 1% fee after sale. I made our pitch so solidly foundational to where it was hard for the person to say no. Every objection they had, I changed the script to make it where that wasn't even, a thought, to where I was answering questions before they had them. I was 3 steps ahead of them with my script, to where anything that they could say no to, I already dismissed it before they even had the thought of saying no. And I built a team of guys to do the same thing. They scaled to about 5 million in cars. A lot of these guys were doing it part-time, so I give them props for what they did. Me personally, I did about 15 or 16 million in inventory brought in, and it was fun. It was a fucking grind. I was up early, I was working at 6:30 in the morning, and then I'd leave to go pick up my girlfriend and take her home, and I'd go, hey babe, I got work to do, and I'd sit back down and fucking work. It's like I have that instilled in me to work, and I love that. I love it, because I see so many people now, they're fucking lost. They don't know what to do. They're my age, they're confused. They're talking about their fucking gender, and it's like, bro, what are we doing? It's like, come on, like, move, have some intensity to you. Go to the gym, go be fucking happy. Everyone's so fucking miserable today. And it's like, what are we doing? So before that, I was in pest control. It's a weird turn of events, but yeah, before that I was in pest control. Got my first sale in about 3 days. The pest control thing just wasn't for me. I know I have a bunch of buddies that make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year doing pest control. All the props to them. I give them all the credit in the world. It fucking sucks. That wasn't for me. I'm a great communicator, but again, that just felt kind of dirty to me. It didn't feel like me. I don't like knocking on someone's door and fucking disrupting their day. I know a lot of people are like, fuck it, it gives me a paycheck. And it's like, cool, bro, all the power to you. But, I was back to being miserable. I was kind of miserable in that fucking position. I just didn't like it. I felt like I was constantly bothering people. I was annoying them. I was the fucking, asshole that was knocking doors and going, hi, do pest control. Oh, you do? Well, who do you have? Oh, we have these guys. Oh, well, they're horrible. We've changed 4 people over this week. I hated that. I didn't like that. So I wasn't in that for long. I was maybe in pest control for like 2 months. Then I jumped into the car world. Before pest control, I was doing luxury car detailing. I worked at a place here in Scottsdale that we did all the work for our local Ferrari dealership, our McLaren dealership, Lamborghini we did a little bit of work for. Most of the time it was Ferrari and McLaren, and then private clientele. Our private clientele was crazy. We did stuff for some of the wealthiest people in Arizona. I'd go and pick up cars from these people's houses. A lot of them were so fucking sweet. But you pull up into this house in Paradise Valley, which is already the most expensive zip code in Arizona, and then you pull onto a 10-acre lot of a 50,000 square foot house, and you're like, what the fuck is going on? And then I pull up and 8 garage doors open, and 2 of the cars I gotta take, it's a fucking Lamborghini Cullinan, lifted 4x4 G-Wagon, a Rolls Royce, Phantom. I lost it. Because I was like, holy shit, people actually do this. You know, it's like, I knew that there was wealthy people in this world, but there's a lot of wealthy, quiet people that have fuck you money. And they're quiet about it. You know, they don't flaunt their wealth. They're not out here wearing Gucci and Louis Vuitton and all this, you know, tacky shit. It's like, no, these people are straight up just like, yeah, you know, I'm wearing my $5 t-shirt, I got $20 pants on, and I'm wearing my flip-flops. And you're like, bro, you could buy whatever you want. And they're like, exactly, but I like what I wear. And it's like, okay, cool, bro, all the power to you. And that taught me a lot, you know, because I wear $5 t-shirts now. You know, I wear, you know, my nice business pants are like $50, $60. You know, it's like all my suits I buy on sale. You know, it's like I learned from a lot of these people that I communicated with, and I started to kind of build a friendship with them that, hey, you know, if you want nicer things in certain places, take a sacrifice on the things you don't really care about. I like clothes. I like looking good. But do I need to spend fucking $600 on a pair of pants from Banana Republic? No. You know, I'm fine with my H&M shit or my Express shit that's on sale that's $20, $30. You know, I still look good. All my friends are like, oh, he's got the old money, you know, look. He's got that, you know, influence about him that, you know, just screams old money. And it's like, bro, I'm wearing a $60 outfit. You know, my shirt's $5. I got a $15 belt on. I got $40 pants on, and then I got like $100 shoes on. You know, it's like shoes I'll spend a little bit more money on because, you know, if you buy cheap shoes, they're uncomfortable. Okay, my ADHD's going off, so I gotta fucking redirect. Pest control. Before pest control, I was at automotive detailing. We talked a little bit about that. That was great. That was fun. It was a grind, though. My back hurt every day when I got home from work. You know, crawling around. That's a sick sand buggy. You'll see it slide by there. But yeah, you know, I was tired at the end of every day. I was working my fucking ass off. I was getting screamed at for shit that wasn't really necessary to get screamed at for. You know, or things that I just didn't know. You know, they acted like I'd been in detailing for 5 years. I was like, bro, I've never done this. The only reason I was at that spot was I crashed into my now business partner's BMW M3. He had a Vorsteiner trunk. You know, he had aftermarket rear bumper. I almost totaled this thing with my Jeep. I fucked his shit. I pushed his shit in, to say the least. But yeah, I was there to, you know, kind of learn that route. You know, I was like, hey, you know, worst comes to worst, you know, I have a little bit of detailing experience.
Red light camera ahead.
Okay, a little bit of detailing experience. I could go back, you know, there if I really needed to eventually. And I was getting paid pretty good. I got paid like $1,500 every 2 weeks. But you know, again, it was a fucking grind. I was fucking working my ass off. I'd come home every day and I had no energy to do anything. That's a sick M4. No energy to do anything. You know, like I was exhausted. My legs hurt. My fucking lower back was killing me because I'm crawling under a McLaren seat with, you know, my foot or my back on the carbon tub, and I'm trying to get glass out of this thing because it got broken into, or, you know, it was like shit like that. It was a grind. So anytime I see someone detailing, I have so much respect for them because most people don't understand how much work goes into that shit. And they're like, oh, you're just cleaning a car. It's like, no, bro. When you're doing, at least I was doing, you know, like $5,000 details, you know, where I'm taking seats out of cars, I'm, you know, gutting cars, I'm going into extreme detail, you know, like seats like these where they have the little, you know, breathable leather. I'd go through with toothpicks and poke every single one to get the shit out of it. And it was like, it was so mind consuming, and it was tough on my body. It was tough on my mind because I'd get halfway through a seat and go, fuck, you know, I was thinking about something else and I lost train of thought, and I don't know where the fuck on this seat I last pushed one. So I'm just gonna start somewhere in the middle. And you know, it was such a strong, strict point of detailing that I was in, because the company I worked for was they had that about them. You know, they had the premier tag. You know, we did all the cars for Barrett-Jackson. We did all the cars for McLaren. We did all the cars for Ferrari. You know, it was like we were very, 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 very precise on our details. And it kind of ruined my flavor for things, because now I'll go get, you know, I'll run my car through a car wash, and I'm like, oh, these motherfuckers missed this, they missed this, they missed this. And then I have to ground myself and be like, hey, you know, these guys don't know. You know, they're getting paid, you know, under the table, and you know, they don't really know what they're doing here. Like, our base detail was a car wash, and that was $120, and that was most places detail. You know, our physical, like, detail I think started at like a base of like 1,000. But that was fun. It was a grind. It got me back into that mindset of, I gotta figure something out. And that's when I went into the car world, you know, soon after that. But before that, I was in real estate. I was doing cold calls, you know, 1,500 calls a day, 500 emails, 500 texts. I was banging shit out. You know, I was ripping the wax pen, ripping the vape, and just banging out calls. You know, it was fun, but it was also a grind. You know, I was up at, you know, ass crack of dawn at 4:30 in the morning, getting ready by, you know, 5, 6 o'clock, out the door by 6:30, at the office by 7. You know, at 8 o'clock, my phone started dialing, you know, because that's what I had to wait till to actually start calling people, was around 8 o'clock. Did I always do that? No. You know, I didn't care. I was 18. I was like, what are you gonna do, bro? Sue me for fucking calling your phone, asking if you want to sell your property? I'd be calling moms, and they're like, hello. And, you know, they'd be trying to take their kid to school or pack their kid up to get ready for school. And they're like, don't call me, and then hang up the phone. That was pretty fun. You know, but again, I kind of felt dirty about that. You know, I didn't really like that. I didn't like people hating me. You know, so before that, I was obviously in high school. You know, 2 weeks out of high school, I got into real estate. In high school, I was horrible. I hated high school. I hated school in general. My biggest downfall was math. I hated math. And it's funny because, you know, like geometry, I was horrible in. Now I'm really, you know, I understand geometry a lot more than I did, because, you know, building my product, you know, I had to kind of learn geometry. I had to learn, you know, radiuses. I had to learn this. I had to learn that. So I kind of had to learn it, but I had ChatGPT there to help me in Claude. So it made it a lot easier. Do I really understand it to the full, you know, extent? No. But do I know what I'm doing? You know, yeah, I understand it. But thanks, Claude. You know, I gotta give a little hat tip to Claude. But hated school. Graduated with like a 1.4. I just didn't like it. You know, I was a failing student most of the time. You know, I was the kid that, you know, I was making people laugh more than I cared about, you know, paying attention in class. I knew I wasn't going to go to college. I was like, dude, I'm just here to get a diploma to give to my mom. And I did that. You know, I graduated. I didn't go to graduation because it was COVID, and they were like, well, you got to stay 6 feet apart. We're not even going to hand you the diploma, blah, 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 blah. So I went in early to the office, and I was like, yo, give me my diploma. Like, I'm not coming to the graduation tonight. And they were like, we don't know if we can do that. And I was like, well, I want my diploma now. I'm not coming back another day to get it. And I kind of need that. That's mine. So they ended up giving it to me. They gave me my gown and shit too. And I was like, hey, I'm not wearing the gown. It's still in the bag. You know, everything's still here. Can you just give it to someone that, you know, maybe was not fortunate enough to be able to afford one? Because our gowns were pricey, bro, for no reason too. Like I think our gowns were like $80-$90. And I was like, bro, for what? Like, it's really not that important of a gown. It's maroon. Like, you would think that they would give you like a price reduction for having maroon. Who orders maroon? But hey, they wouldn't let me do that. And I was like, why not? And they were like, well, it's kind of against our guidelines here. And I was like, you can't just give it to somebody. You can't just not take it or not give it to me and just give it to someone else and we just don't talk about this. And they were like, no, we can't do that. So I had to take the gown. I still have the gown in its bag, in its, little bag that they gave it to me in. I still have the little medal that people hang from their, rear view mirror. Oh, we graduated. I hate that. But yeah, it was like, hated school, knew I was always going to find my own way with entrepreneurship. I knew that from a young age too. In like 3rd grade, I was selling like the military paracord bracelets. I was making them at home, bringing them to school, selling them, kind of under the table. I think I was selling them for like $20 a pop, or like, no, it was less than that. I think it was like $5 a pop. And, I loved that. I loved making my own little product and bringing it to school and having people go, hey, can you make it for me, but in these colors? It was fun. It was fun. But now let's talk a little bit about Vero. I'm not trying to make this too fucking long. Vero it's going to be the world's largest lens cleaner. And I know that for a fact. I wear glasses on a daily basis. I understand how important a product like this is. And the more I did research on it, the more I understood it's, really a need to clean your glasses, the correct way so you don't destroy them. Which is something I'll educate a lot of, customers on, and, put it out on, Instagram of, hey, you're cleaning your glasses wrong, blah, 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 blah. Stuff like that. But I know it's going to be huge. It's just only a matter of time before I get it in people's hands and they go, oh wow, this is really nice to have. And from there it'll take off. I know it will. There's no way it doesn't. There's no way this product doesn't win. There's nothing like it on the market. I'm patent pending. If Ray-Bans wants to come and partner with me or buy me out, it's like I have numbers in my head that I'd like to see in order for a buyout or in order for a partnership. I already have a lot of this stuff kind of planned out. And, I thank my business partner so much for what he's done for me. I've pretty much built this company from nothing on my own. He was just an investor in it. And at first we batted heads a lot because he was like, hey, I want to be more involved, give me things to do. And I am a very big person on like, hey, if you want something to be done right, do it yourself. Like back to detailing. If I want my car detailed, I'm going to do it myself because I want it to look a certain way. And I know that most people are not going to have that same intensity about thinking about it. So, if you want something done right, do it yourself. And I was raised on that, and that is a very core piece of me. And, it was hard for me to kind of tell him that, of like, hey, bro, I don't really want you too hands-on with this business. I'm going to handle most of it. You have a background in finance. I'd love for you to kind of more focus on the finance side of things. And, hey, we're losing money here. We got a leak here with money. Let's plug that. Let's do this. It's like, that's what I needed him for. The business aspect itself, I have a pretty solid understanding of. The only thing I don't really have a solid understanding of is the marketing. But like business itself, I understand pretty damn well. I've always studied, successful entrepreneurs, Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs. A lot of these guys I studied, and then it was like recently, I've been getting into, philosophy and philosophers and learning about them and understanding how their mind kind of worked. And that's been a big part of, like me recently is, studying that and learning it and figuring things out about my body that I never knew. But yeah, it's like, you need to kind of, if you want to be an entrepreneur, you gotta have a fucking strong mind, and also you gotta have a strong body. It may not look like it from, this point of view. I've put on about 60 pounds in the last year, mainly because I've been bulking, trying to put on more muscle, trying to put on some more weight. I weigh like 190 right now, which I think is, I don't know the kilometers, or whatever the weight is in Europe. I don't know that off the top of my head. But you can do your own math. But yeah, it's like you have to be strong with it. You have to be willing to do the boring shit daily, constantly. It's like the amount of times I am sitting there on my computer going like, this is really boring. But knowing it's what I have to do to get to the point that I want to is important. Having that constant reminder of like, hey, I'm doing this for myself, I'm doing this for my future, and I'm doing this for my family, has really been what's pushed me through with a lot of it, is, having that mindset of, I've done more boring tasks than this. I've sat on Mojo phone dialer for 3 hours and not had a single person pick up the phone and just click a button. Next. Oh no, let's let it ring. Oh, no one's picking up. Next. And it was like, that was more boring than the task I do now. But you have to be religious about your company. Like I left the dealerships to go all in on this because I was like, hey, if I'm not all in on this, then the likelihood of its success is a lot less. For the reason that somebody else is all in on theirs. And like, that's how I had to think about it, is it's like, hey, I'm making no fucking money right now as it is at the dealership. I might as well go make no money and be all in on my company and grind shit out, do shit, and become, one, the man I want to see in the mirror, and two, have a company behind me that is a fucking empire. And it's like, that's what I've been after, is having those values about me that say, look, you may work harder than me today, but over the next 2 years, I guarantee you I'll outwork you. And it's like, having that inside of you is better than the guy who goes, oh dude, I'm gonna grind for the next 6 months and then expect a result. It has been 8, 9, almost 10 months that I've been a part in building Vero, and I don't even have a physical product. It's like, yeah, I've had 3D prints. The first 2 months I kind of pushed off with building it into a company. I was like, is it really a need? Maybe not. And then, the more I talk to people about it, the more people are like, dude, you need to bring this to market. This is something that'll do well if it's done correctly. And it's like, it has been a grind. Working on something for like strictly 8 months with no paycheck is very difficult. I'm lucky to be in a position that I am where, my parents help me out. I live with my parents right now, as, shameful as it is to say, but it's like, bro, I'm all in on this company. I don't have another route. There is no fucking plan B. It's like, bro, Vero either works or I go do a fucking 9 to 5. It's like, my daily routine is like, get up, fucking grind, get after it, go to the gym, work your ass off, make it to where it's almost impossible for this company not to succeed. And that is something I've been very, very strict on the past, especially like 4 months. After I left the dealership, I've been very, very strict on myself and the company, and this needs to get done, and this needs to get done, and boom, 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 just knocking shit out. I thank Claude so much for being my little, assistant, making me a schedule and going, hey, this is what we need to do today, and I just fucking sit there and I pound them out, and then I'm like, hey, here's what I need to do tomorrow. Let's keep it moving. Hey, Claude, do you have any ideas for me on what I should do with this? Let's change it to something like this. Cool, boom, bang it out. It's like, I love that. I love being able to work and grind and move and do things and move quickly. It's like, yes, a lot of this has been a learning curve of like what it really takes to learn a business and grow a business. It's like, yeah, right now I think I have like 4 followers on my TikTok for the company. I have like 11 for my personal subscribers here on YouTube. I have like 7, which it's going to be a lot more here soon. I'm happy I'm kind of ensuing on this journey of building a personal brand now, so people can see like, oh, it wasn't an overnight success. This shit took a long time for him to do. I wish I would have started it earlier. I wish I would have started this when I, first kind of wrote up the blueprint of, the company outline. It would have been fun to kind of see that now. But now we're really close to getting a prototype, which is the biggest step for our company. Because then, I can go start, shooting a bunch of content with it and really starting to push Vero on the market and say, this is the best glasses cleaner that's ever hit the market. Here's why. It's refillable. You can wash the towel, you can replace the towel, and like really, really hammering that in is going to be very important for the company, because like I want to be able to post 3 videos a day, 3-4 videos a day. It's like, you look at TGR, he's posting like 30 TikToks a day. He makes it to where if you follow him, all you see is him. And it's like, that's kind of how I want to eventually get to with Vero, is like, bro, I'm posting so much content where I'm the only thing you see all fucking day long. All you can think about is Vero, 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 Vero. I want to be able to get to the point where I'm posting so much, I have some people unfollowing me because it's almost a little annoying how much I'm on their feed. I got ads running behind it. I got me posting, 10, 15 videos a day, plus another 5 photos a day. It's like, that's the shit that needs to be done in order for a company to really succeed in today's world, I think. You have to hammer content. You have to be on social media. You have to just be so and utterly aggressive to the point where it's like, I cannot lose. I'm posting everywhere. Even if you don't follow me, you're seeing my shit. Even if you don't have glasses or anything to clean, you could be a slob and you're still seeing my shit. It's like, that's what I'm after, is chasing the greatness of a company.